YouTube. So a while back I made a tutorial using geometry nodes to create a flower and I got a lot of requests asking me how I created the procedural materials and the assets needed to actually create this flower. So I said I would make a tutorial about it, and I did, so here it is. I hope you enjoy it, I hope you learned something from it, and I hope it answers all your questions. If it does, then please leave a like, subscribe, and click on the bell icon for further notifications on future video that I make. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me in the comments. I want to point out that the project files for this video are available on my Gumroad. And if you make this yourself, then please share with me on Instagram. It's always really cool to see what you guys make. So let's get started.
Okay, so I've opened up a fresh Blender scene and we'll go ahead and create the assets and the materials needed for the geometry nodes flower tutorial. So like always, we'll start off by hitting A and X to delete everything and giving us a blank slate here. And now, first of all, we want to start adding in a curve. So let's shift a curve and choose the Bezier curve here. And let's go into front view with numpad 1. Hit R with the curve selected, Y 90 and R Z 90, making the curve face towards us. Now, if we tap into edit mode, we can edit the curve here. So we can select each point on the curve and just use the regular tools of G, S for scale, G to move, R to rotate. And I will just do that until I get a curve which is something that I'm looking for. Now, you can obviously tell by the end result that I went for a sort of S shape, very bland S shape. And now if we open up the object data properties, we can add a bevel under the geometry tab here and make sure we click on fill caps. Now, fill caps will close off the ends here. And if we select one of these vertices, we can hit Alt S to actually decrease the weight of the vertex. Allowing us to taper the entire curve, so we get this nice tapered effect, making it look more realistic. Now I want to up the resolution for the curve, so in the object data properties again, let's just up the resolution for the curve there and also for the bevel, so we get a nice high resolution curve. Now let's add in another curve and repeat those steps, so R, Y 90, R, Z 90, G to move it to the side, tap into edit mode, and let's just edit this curve as well. And in this case, I want to create the flower stalk, so not the entire plant stalk, but the specific flower stalk. So I'm just going to change the curve here until it fits my taste. So go ahead and create one that suits yours. And I think this will do nicely. And I want to go ahead and add another bevel. So in the geometry tab, on the object data properties, add the bevel, choose fill caps, and scale again. Now I'm going to take the bottom vertex as well and scale this one out so we get a more dramatic taper, because I think the flowers need a rigid stalk for the weight of the petals. Now that's 2, and we want to add in one more Bezier curve, and this will be the hairs, which will be on top of the flower heart. So another curve, let's just scale this down outside of edit mode and tap into edit mode next. Now just edit the curve again until we get something funky like this. I'm just going to give it a very tiny bevel of 0.01. And I'm just going to take the top vertex again. So tap into edit mode, Alt S to scale, and just scale it down for the taper and make sure fill caps is enabled again. Now let's just rename our curves here. So I'm going to rename this one the flower stalk. This can go to flower heart hair. I should type that correctly, like so. And we already had the main one, which is the overall plant stalk. Now, next up, we want to create the flower heart, and we do that by adding in a icosphere. We up the subdivisions to 3. Right-click to shade smooth, and let's tap into edit mode and go into wireframe by hitting Z. Now let's select the bottom half of our icosphere and just delete it. Make sure we delete the entire half like so. And that's done with the modeling already, super simple. And now we just want to create some randomness with the displacement modifier. So I'm going to add in a displacement modifier. Make sure we click a new texture there and open up the texture menu. And for the texture type, I'm going to use a clouds texture. And I think everything is looking pretty fine. I'm just going to decrease the size a bit so we get a more spiky look like so. And now we want to add in a subdivision surface as well. Crank it up to 2, render to 3. And that's all we need to do modeling wise and modifier wise. Now let's just maybe squish it down. So Z to squish it down a bit. And I think this is looking fine. Let's just scale the entire thing down as well. And I want to change the displace texture from local to global. So when you move it, we actually get a random effect, which is great because now if we generate all these flower hearts in the geometry node system, we actually get random hearts, making it look more unique, more realistic, and that's obviously what we want here. Now, next up, we want to create the petal. And to do that, we're going to start off by adding in a plane. Super simple, basic. I'm just going to rename the parts. Yep, like so. And for the plane, I'm just going to rename this leaf. However, I should rename this petal as well. So petal. And let's tap into edit mode for the plane there. And we want to start off by giving this a single subdivide. So right click and subdivide. All right, so now let's go into vertex select mode. And let's select these two vertices and then hit Ctrl X to dissolve them. And we will end up with 1 at the top there. And on the bottom row, we are going to do something else. I'm just going to drag down the middle vertex with G and Y. Just pull these down like so. I'm just going to hit Ctrl R to add a loop cut. S, Y, and 0 to scale it along the Y-axis to 0 so it becomes straight. That's just something I like to do in general. And now let's just manipulate all of these vertices until we get a leaf-like, petal-like shape. And I think that's fine. We don't need too much detail right now. We will fix that all with modifiers. I'm just going to hit right-click and subdivide the entire thing once. And now I want to add some shape to the leaf. So I'm just going to go back into edit mode and select one of the single vertices on the top of the leaf there. And I'm going to go into the right view with numpad 3. And I'm going to hit G to move it up. Now, nothing happens with all the other vertices, and that's because we need to enable proportional editing. So we can do that by clicking there or by typing O. And now if we move it up, so with GZ, we can actually move the entire thing by scrolling our scroll wheel and enabling the field of effect. I'm just going to enable all of it until it does not affect the final vertex on the left side. I'm just going to pull everything up, giving us a more organic shape. Now I'm going to take one of the vertices in the middle here. I'm just going to pull it down in its entirety, so it becomes slightly more curved inwards, like so. And I think this is a pretty decent shape for a flower petal. All right, now let's make sure the origin of the petal is at the right place there. So I'm going to go into edit mode again with tab, and I'm going to select everything and move it so it sort of lines up, which is a good thing because now it's easier for us to duplicate the petals along and actually rotate them. So if I shift D, R, I can rotate them along their own axis, making it easier to generate flowers. Next up, we want to add in some modifiers. So first of all, let's add in a subdivision surface, crank it up to 2 in the viewport and 3 for the final render. Shade smooth, and that's the overall shape. Next, we want to add in a displace modifier again. And let's open up the texture there and go into clouds again. And for this specific purpose, I'm going to use a very big size cloud texture because I want these shapes to affect the leaf in its entirety and don't give me many small details. So that's also why I decreased the depth to 1. And now we get some very smooth shapes going. I'm just going to maybe tweak the effect a bit and see what happens there. And I'm going to go into global as well. So every duplicate leaf or petal in this case will be unique. And that's something obviously that we want for realism. Now I'm just going to leave this at 1. It's fine like so. And I think that's done. Now let's just duplicate this one, tap into edit mode and just switch some of these around. So and just move them around, rotate them. Maybe decrease the scale of effect, just rotate it, make it unique. And this will allow us to add them to a group eventually. And in our other tutorial, we can use these combined to generate more randomness among our leaves. Now, I forgot one last modifier, and that's the solidify modifier. And we need that to add some thickness, which will make the subsurface look good. Now, this is looking kind of thick, so that's a bit too much. I'm going to dial it down. I'm going to go for something like a 0.03, maybe even less. Yeah, I'm just going to go for 0.01. Super thin leaves. That's fine. Yeah. Now make sure to add it to the other leaves as well. So 0.01 on the solidify there. And that's done. Now let's get into shading. So let's open up the shading window here and close off these windows real quick. And let's start off by adding our stalk material. So with the main stalk selected, let's add a new material and call it stalk. Make sure to apply it to the flower stalk as well. And let's just solo this with the / on your keyboard. And let's start working on the material. Now the material is pretty simple. And we are going to start off by adding in a color ramp and plugging that into both the base color and the subsurface color. Now next up, let's add in a noise texture. Plug these into each other. And then with the noise texture selected, let's hit Ctrl T. Now, if this does not work for you, go into Preferences to Add-ons and make sure you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. This will allow you to do this easily with just Ctrl T. For the values, I'm going to use some numbers here. So let's go into that. I'm just going to increase the black value real quick so we get some effect there, so we can actually see something happening. And now in the mapping node for the X scale, I'm going to use a value of 3.7. Giving us some more variation there. And I'm going to change the texture coordinate from generated to UV. And this will stretch out the look, which I think fits the material. So I'm just going to go with UV here. And now for the scale on the noise texture, I'm going to go with 25. I can up the detail to 5 here. And I think that's all we need to do. Now, for the color ramp, I'm just going to change up the colors. First of all, let's add in a third color, drag it to the left here, and set it to constant. All right, so that's that. Now let's drag this one to the left and this one to the left as well. Let's just change these colors. So for the right one, I'm going to go for a bright green, like so. For the middle one, I'm just going to color pick the same green, but then make it darker. And finally, for the left one, I'm going to go and color pick again, but this time make it lighter and also drag it towards the yellow. Now I'm just going to increase the roughness to 0.75. And finally, I want to up the subsurface to 0.15 so we can actually get some of that subsurface look going. And also in this case, I'm just going to increase the transmission slightly by 0.15-ish. Now, if we go over to cycles, change it to GPU compute and enable the denoising, we can actually go over to our world settings as well and change it from a gray color to a sky texture. Now let's go into rendered view, and I'm just going to copy the settings from my other tutorial, which are pretty basic. So pause the video here and make sure to copy the sky settings here. And as you can see, the texture for this object is looking pretty good. Now, next up, let's work on the flower heart material. So select the flower heart and let's go into the material preview again. Add a new material, and I'm just going to call this one heart. And it's actually pretty simple for this one as well. And we are going to start off by adding in a use saturation node and plugging that into the base color. Now we want to add in a color ramp next, plug that into the color there. And let's just drag these in and create a bunch more colors. So I'm going to go for 5, like so. Just sort of space them out evenly. And I'm just going to take some yellowish, grayish, brownish colors, each dark and light combined, until we get some variation going, maybe slightly greenish as well. I'm just going to color pick each of these until I get something, maybe some orange color. White is fine as well. And now if we add in a noise texture and plug that into the color ramp, we should be getting something here. I'm just going to up the scale there to 16.5. And let's just tweak some of these colors on the color ramp there. So now all the details gone. So I'm just going to drag these over, just looking for the nice combination there. Now I'm going to increase the detail as well for the noise texture. And I want to add in another color ramp here. Take the factor and plug that into this one. Add in a bump node and take the color and plug that into the height there, and then plug the normal into the normal. And now if this updates, we should be getting some bump just to get some smaller details going as well. Now if we hit Control T on the noise texture again for the mapping and texture coordinate nodes, we have the entire setup done. I'm just going to tweak the color ramp slightly. All right, so that covers the flower heart material. And now let's move on over to the hair material here. So let's select the item there, add a new material, and then call it hair. And for the base color, I'm going to change this to a very pale yellowish tint. For the translucency, or I mean the subsurface color, I'm going to do the same and then increase the subsurface as well. Now increase the transmission to a high number like a 0.8 or 0.7. And effectively, that's all we need to do for the hairs. So done. Okay, so now on to our most important material, the petals. So let's select one of these, add a new material, and let's call it Petal. And this one is a more complicated material, so it will involve some more steps. However, the first one, as always, is either a noise texture or a color ramp. So I'm going to start off by adding some noise textures. Now I've added two, duplicated it, and plugged these into each other. The first one can go to 4D and the second one can stay at 3D. Now, if we change the scale on the right one to 5.4, and let's just plug this into the base color real quick so we can actually see some stuff happening there. And let's hit update. Yep, okay, so there it is. We need to change some other values as well. So the detail on the right texture can go to 16 and on the left one as well. The scale on the left one can go to 2. And the roughness on the right one can go all the way down to 0. Now we get this texture. And if we now add in a color ramp here for some more contrast, I'm going to change this one to constant. Drag this white value in like so. And now we get a more contrasted material. Now let's change the white value to a darker purple color and the black one to the same one, but then way lighter. And we should get something pretty cool already. So that's a decent start. Now let's take the noise texture on the left there and then check out what this W slider does. Effectively, this W slider will give us a random texture. So to make use of this randomness, we are going to add in a object info node and take the random value there and plug it into the W factor. Now, what will happen is if we duplicate the petals, we will get unique petals with unique textures, just like in real life. So that's obviously what we want for realism in this case. Now, for the noise texture, also enable the mapping and texture coordinate nodes with Control T. And let's use the UV coordinates. And I'm just going to increase, or in this case, decrease the X scale to -11, and the Y scale can go to 2. Now let's move these nodes to the side and let's add a gradient texture next. And we will combine this with the other color we already created. So let's duplicate the color ramp and change this one to linear. Now plug in the gradient texture to the color ramp there and change up these colors. I want more vividness on this one. So very hot pink purplish color. And for the darker one, I'm going to use a brighter purple color as well. This one can go down to a more bright pink. Get some contrast, make it slightly darker. Yeah, this is fine. Now let's add in a mix RGB node next and plug that in here and plug the bottom color ramp into the bottom color as well. Now let's take the value and set it to a 0.8. And for the gradient texture, let's add a mapping and texture coordinate node as well. Now for this gradient texture, we'll be using the object texture coordinates. And we will be changing the gradient texture from linear to quadratic sphere, which will give us this effect at the bottom here. I'm just going to change the location and just eyeball this until you're happy with it. So it sort of lines up with the base of the petal. Now, if we change the color ramp to B-spline, the effect will be more gradual. And I think that's looking better. Now we need to add one more layer of color. And in this case, we are going to add another mix RGB node to do that. And we are going to set it to overlay for now. And now let's add in another color ramp and take the gradient texture, which we already created. Take the factor and plug it into this one. And now let's take the color from the color ramp and plug it into the factor for the mix RGB node. Effectively, we'll be using the gradient texture as a mask for the other color that we are going to add now. So let's duplicate the noise texture with the 4D and add another color ramp. Plug this into each other and let's change the color ramp to constant, drag in the white value and change this one to black, and take the black value and change it to a very bright blue color like so. Now let's take it and plug it into the bottom socket of the mix RGB node there. And let's take the random value from our object info node and plug it into the W slider for this one as well, just to add some more randomness. Okay, so let it update a bit and increase the scale to something like 50. Now it's hardly noticeable, but it's there, and we can actually take this black value, maybe drag it to the right a bit, and now we can manipulate this with our color ramp. So if we just drag these sliders in, you will see some stuff is starting to appear. Now I'm going to change this from overlay to screen because screen will effectively remove all the black. So I get this nice bright spotty effect. I'm just going to tweak these sliders until I'm happy with the result. And now let's take all of these nodes, move them to the side and add in a bump node. Take the color from the top color ramp there and plug it into the height. It will automatically convert into black and white. And take the normal from the bump and plug it into the bump, or I mean normal for the principled BSDF. Now I'm going to increase the strength to 5 so we get some nice contrast there. And now if we go into render view, you will see we get this nice look for the petal already. And if we then hit Shift D and R to rotate it, we can duplicate this step with Shift R. It's a very neat trick, so please remember this one. It's very handy, and we will create a flower really quick just so I can show you guys the texture is working. Now, one important step I forgot is to actually plug in the final mix RGB node into the subsurface color and then increase the subsurface to a 0.5. And this will give us the bright see-through-esque look which flowers have if bright sunlight hits them. And I think it makes it look way more realistic, way more bright, way more vivid, and really adds to the effect. So do make sure to enable that. Now I quickly threw together the stalk and the heart with the petals that I have here to just create a quick flower so you guys can see what we will create eventually in the geometry nodes tutorial with these assets. So I will put the link in the description again, and this is the flower as is with all the procedural materials, super easy to create. As I said, fully procedural, so everything will be unique and is easily tweakable if you don't like it. Now that brings us to the end result. So this is a quick animation I did for the geometry node flower that I created in the previous tutorial I made about it. I hope you learned something from this video, and if you did, then please leave a like, subscribe or comment down below. I want to point out the project files for this video are available on my Gumroad, and if you decide to make this yourself, then please share with me on Instagram. See you in the next one.